Hey, good morning, everybody. It's again the CNY Urban Guy on the air once again, and we're very, very happy this morning because we got a very special guest. I'm really excited about this. I've been excited for all the guests we've had on this program, but today we're going to delve into the nostalgia of one of the big radio names, AM radio names in the Mohawk Valley area a few years ago. Now he's in Washington, D.C., and making a big name for himself there as president of the World Folk Music Association. But first of all, I want to check to see about my co-host, if he's there. Are you there, co-host?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear. So, I'm very excited about our guest today from Washington, D.C. We've got Mr. Dick Cerri, who's the president of the World Folk Music Association. So I guess you're kind of anxious to hear what he's got to say, too, right?
Yeah.
Hello? Okay, all right.
Is Mr. Cerri on?
Yeah. Hey, Dick, are you there?
Hello, testing 1, 2, 3, 4.
There you go. You're on the air. My God, you sound very, very good. Hello. How's it going?
Well, greetings from the nation's capital.
Always nice to hear the sound of your voice, and thank you very much for agreeing to appear on our show. I want you to meet my co-host, Lou.
Mr. Cerri, how are you this morning?
Another Lou, huh? Two Lou's in the world.
That's right.
I don't know if we're ready for this. Well, it's good to talk to you guys. And Mr. Brill, as you know, I've been a fan of yours for more than 50 years. To have this honor to play in your sandbox for a couple of minutes is a real pleasure, and I'm very pleased about it. And I, too, was up all night with all this excitement waiting for this opportunity.
Hey,
good to talk to you.
Thank you very much. We spoke last night about you too getting your own internet radio station and also joining Blog Talk Radio with your own show, because as president of the the Folk Music Association or the World Folk Music Association?
There you go, the world. Yeah, now that we got the internet, we reach around the world with everything now.
Okay, just kind of introduce you to our listeners. Let's start from day one. I know you were born in Utica, New York. You attended Utica schools. How did you get into radio broadcasting? What was your motivation?
Well, I kind of fell into it. Credit should go to Betty Cushing Griffin. While I was a sophomore in high school, Proctor, I became a member of Youth Presents, and after the first year, I was awarded Best Actor for the year, and Betty offered me a job for the following summer as control board operator and weekend announcer, the announcing trick. So at 16 years old, I had my first job in radio.
There you go.
I'd gone to heaven.
Now, you were still attending Proctor High School? Pardon me, I didn't mean to.
I was a junior at Proctor. So being in high school and being on the radio was quite a big thing back in those days.
Well, sure, you became a big celebrity.
Well, I did put on a lot of weight. Yes, I did. After I got on radio.
No, I didn't mean that. Come on, now don't. That's not nice. I didn't mean that at all.
When you get involved in radio, you don't do too much exercise. Now, back in those early days, you'll remember the early days of radio. You have a cup of coffee and a cigarette, and you just sit there. Now we got rid of the cigarettes and some of the coffee.
Yeah. Well, Dick, now how many years did you spend employed by WIBX AM radio, Utica, New York?
WIBX, I started officially on their payroll in 1952, and was there. I have to think about this for a second. I did go into college, so I was in college and still at IBX. And then I moved up the street to WRUN, Danny Fusco. Came down to see me, and his engineer was leaving, and he wanted to know if I'd be interested in moving over. And from $54.50 a week, I went up to $75 a week.
Oh, when you're big, you're big.
Oh, I thought going up to $75 a week, I thought I had made it, and that was it for the rest of my life. I was a rich man at $75 a week. And I was there until No, I was just going to say I was there until 1960, and then I moved down here to Washington. Followed my brother down here, and we even worked together at one radio station, which is a little unusual for brothers to work at a radio station together. He was doing a morning show, and I did the afternoon show, and we started folk music when I first came down in 1961. At that time, I wasn't really sure what folk music was, but I was getting such a reaction to it, I decided to look into a little deeper, and I didn't have a label for it. I kind of knew what it was, but I didn't know what they called it. So I found out it was Joan Baez and Judy Collins and Peter, Paul, and Mary, and John Denver eventually, and a whole lot of other people. So I really got involved in it and was doing folk music for 6 hours a night, 7 nights a week. And the only station probably in the world doing that much folk music at the time. And that really started everything, because folk music in the 60s was really popular, making the top charts. You know, you could find 3 or 4 folk songs in the top 10. Peter, Paul, and Mary and the Kingston Trio albums were always there. So we were very popular there for a few years during the 60s. Had a good run of it.
I think my co-host would like to ask you a question along those lines. Co-host?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Mr. Cerri, I guess my question is, what makes folk music folk music? What are the fundamental elements that put you in that genre?
What makes folk music folk music? What's the definition of folk music? I have a dear friend by the name of Oscar Brand who researched that question for over a year, and the old traditional explanation of folk music was music that was never written. It was handed down from generation to generation, vocally, and author unknown, and all kinds of stuff like that. But after a year, Oscar came up with a definition that he uses to this day, and I kind of subscribe to the same thing. And his definition of folk music is anything I say it is.
Okay. Okay.
So there's a wide definition of anything you want to say is folk music. The Beatles, you know, a lot of the rock stars. U2 is considered a group that is folk. All the way back to, you know, the guy sitting in the woods playing guitar, singing Shenandoah. So it's pretty wide in general, but I kind of use the performers. When somebody said, what is folk music? Is bluegrass, country music? And I generally say, well, country music and bluegrass fall under the umbrella of folk music. Folk music sort of engulfs all of that. And I use the performers, contemporary performers, that you'd have to use. It would be Joan Baez and Judy Collins and Peter, Paul, and Mary and Gordon Lightfoot, people like that. And the more traditional folk singers would be Woody Guthrie, you know, Leadbelly, even Brill Ives back in the 50s used to hang out with Woody Guthrie. And a lot of people remember Brill Ives and the Blue Tail Fly and got interested in folk music because of him. And most of us remember, you know, listening to a group. For me, it was back in the 1950s, 1950 to be exact, when I heard the Weavers on radio. Lou, you remember the days of radio when we had the top 10 songs list?
I sure do.
Was the only list we had.
Yep. I do.
Every week there was a hit parade with 10 songs on it. And one of the top 10 songs in 1950 was a song called Zena, 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 an Israeli dance song.
And then didn't they also have Good Night, Irene?
Oh, yeah. Well, you flipped the song. After a while, it drove everybody crazy listening to Zena, 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 so they flipped the record over. And the flip side was Good Night, Irene. And that was followed by, several... So Long It's Been Good to Know You, and for 2 years they got very popular, and then they got blacklisted. Those were the days of the McCarthy era. And
I recall
they
that.
got blacklisted, lost their jobs, and went their different ways for a few years, got back together in '53 for a reunion at Carnegie Hall, and that started it all over again.
They also recorded the hit. Dick, didn't they also have a big hit on top of Old Smoky?
Oh, sure. Yeah, there's a long list of hits. And I really enjoyed them in 1950, but I didn't know that was folk music. I just enjoyed that kind of music and that sound, the fact that you could sing along with it. And lo and behold, 10 years later, I'm in Washington, D.C., hosting and narrating and announcing a folk music show. So it just goes to show you that there are some things in this life that you just ride along to.
Well, let's get back to your Washington, D.C. radio days. You said that you were playing 6 hours of folk music, and the only station in Washington that was featuring it at that time. No, so how long did you spend working as a station employee in Washington, D.C.?
Well, off and on, from 1960 up to about the mid-'90s. So I guess that was, like 30 years, 35 years. I did straight announcing also I was station manager of a station down, an FM station here that played elevator music, and I programmed that and eventually became station manager and ran it while I was still doing folk music. So I was doing two things at one time. And I really got involved in that. I also had an advertising agency, so I got a lot of things going. One of the biggest account I had at that time was Wolf Trap. I don't know if anybody up in your neck of the woods is familiar with Wolf Trap, but
I am. Yes, I am. I don't know about my co-host Lou, but I am.
Yeah, I haven't heard of it.
Well, he might be a little bit. He might be a little bit too young. But we did their advertising for about 3 years, back in, I guess it was 1980. So I got, a little advertising agency, and I had folk music going, and I was a radio station manager. So for a while, I was very busy. I even did a two-man morning show at a radio station out in Fairfax, Virginia for a few months. I worked for the Johnson family. President Johnson's family owned a radio station just outside of Washington, and I was doing a morning show there with my buddy. They were trying to go big time since they were right next to Washington, and not really that powerful, but they decided to throw a lot of money into the station, and hired me and to do this morning show, and we had a lot of fun with that, but it didn't last very long. They ran out of money.
And how did you, what's the word, the transition from being a radio station employee or, a station manager into the position of president of the World Folk Music Association?
Well, that was another natural thing. Back in the 70s was a transition period for folk music. The 60s saw a lot of folk performers with nice record contracts with major labels. And then the Beatles came in and kind of stopped all of that. And folk performers were looking for other avenues, and some went to Nashville, and some got into rock, and many lost their record contracts. So by the time you get to the 70s, a lot of people didn't know where anybody was. No records in the market. So the 70s were a period of settling down. So about 1980s, we all started to talk about, hey, we've got to start letting people know what's going on. And that's when the World Folk Music Association was incorporated as a nonprofit organization in Washington. And we started to publish a newsletter. A guy by the name of Tom Paxton, who I'm trying to think of a song that he wrote that you and my Rick, the song that is sung every Christmas, Marvelous Toy. He wrote that song, My Dog's Bigger Than Your Dog, which was used for a commercial. We, had a long talk and decided that it was very important to keep in touch with everybody. And let people know what was going on. So that was the reason we got involved with the World Folk Music Association, and we sort of exchanged being president with the organization for a while, and then he decided to go full-time music, which he was already, but I assumed the role and have been in it ever since. And we have been fortunate in presenting a lot of annual benefit concerts down here that have brought together a lot of interesting folk performers. And we even celebrated the 45th anniversary of the Kingston Trio down here, and did a DVD, which is now on the market.
Can I just interrupt? Can I interrupt for just a second? I want to remind our listeners that the Kingston Trio were famous for "Hang Down Your Head, Tom Dooley," the MTA, and other hits. Just kind of, they were really. I guess they're still around too, aren't they?
Oh, they are. Well, they're not the same members. Okay. The original member retired a couple of years ago. Yes, they're still here, and that name is famous. And just on the name alone, they work like 40 weeks out of the year and travel all over the country and all over the world. Peter, Paul, and Mary is another very powerful folk group, probably the only folk group that left over that is still making money. Mary isn't feeling very well these days, so they haven't been able to perform. Peter and Paul were at our last show, and that was a lot of fun. So there are a lot of performers still out there. It's just that they don't have the popularity that they had back in the 60s. But there are a lot of great, talented people that get started in folk music, and a lot of them wind up in rock. And there's so many new names in the music. Your son probably knows all of the new names of music today that I have no idea. Is there still psychedelic music, or is that from the 60s?
Yeah, I think.
You know?
I think the label of psychedelic rock or psychedelic music has certainly come and passed, but it is very difficult to put someone into the category of folk music today. They either fall into rock, country, some of the other genres. But
that's true.
I have a question for you, Mr. Cerri, and that is, how do you see the internet helping new artists outside of a record contract? Do you see a lot of them?
Well, it's just another avenue that is open to them that they'd never had before, where they can play their music that is heard around the world through the internet. And that's what they're doing today. There's a lot of folk performers who have their own website and play their own music and sell their own music and sell tickets to their own shows, and it's become quite a business. And I think the internet has done quite a bit to help not only folk performers, but all performers. It's kind of like back in the 50s, Lou, you remember when there were like 5 record companies and that was it.
Right, correct.
I don't even know if I can remember. It was Columbia, Capitol, MGM, Decca. What else?
Yep.
There was one more and that's all there was. You got records from those 5 companies, and that was it. And I think it was Elvis that probably opened the door to performers going in the garage and cutting a record and putting it on the market and selling it.
Well, Elvis got his start with Sam Phillips in Tennessee. There was in Memphis with the making of. He made a lot of records before he joined RCA Victor, and they were all regional hits, I guess, down south.
Oh yeah. Well, he got it started. He got everybody in the garage making records, and of course Dick Clark came along and down there in Philadelphia had a lot of record companies started, and before you knew it, there were 107 record companies, and that's even expanded today, where everybody, all the artists, make their own records practically. Let's put it that way. Very few.
By the way,
performers.
Dick, did you ever work with Dick Clark at WRUN in Utica?
He was a year ahead of me. When I came there, he came out of Syracuse University and went to work for WKTV. And what was the name he used, Mr. Brill?
Dick Clay.
Dick Clay, right. We're the few people who know that Dick Clark at one time was known as Dick Clay. Because why, Mr. Brill?
Because his father was named Dick Clark, and he was the general manager of WRUN AM radio in Utica, New York at that time. They didn't want to have any conflict.
A fine gentleman to work for, too. He's the one that hired me when I went to WRUN. He was 65 years old when I went there, and he looked like 40. You know, that's why his son always looked like he was still a teenager. Matter of fact, the last time I saw Dick Clark, which was many years ago, I was asking him about his father, and at that time he was like, I don't know, 95. And still going strong, but I think he has passed.
I think he's deceased now, from what Al Cole tells me, yeah.
Yeah, well, Al Cole was another one, RUN. Danny Fusco in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
Bruce Rector was there when I was there.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Now, you had some of the guys... You had some of the radio people at WRUN follow you to Washington, D.C.
Yeah, there were quite a few from WRUN, and, well, there was, not from WRUN, but from, I guess he worked at KAL, where you worked in Rome, Sherm Brody.
Yeah.
Sherm was the first one to come down after I came. He was 6 months after I came down, Sherm came down. Saved me. I was very homesick.
Okay. But he went to work for a periodical, right? A broadcasting magazine?
Eventually, but his first job down here was with a radio station. I think it was WWN.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Okay. Yeah, he was working in radio. Now, I don't know if this is his first job, but I know he was doing radio here. And
how about Bernie Roswick?
Bernie Roswick came down as the assistant to Jim Byrne to work with the United States Postal Service. Both of them worked at WRUN. Jim Byrne came down to be an assistant postmaster general in charge of advertising the entire postal system. Bernie came down as his assistant, and they were here for a couple of years. Jim came down from CBS and eventually went back to CBS as an executive. Bernie got the Postal Service to move him out to Los Angeles, so he didn't have to pay for that. So when he got there, he quit the Postal Service and started his own PR firm. That's good old Bernie. He's a very smart boy.
Yes, he is.
As a matter of fact, we still talk to him today. Many of the people, Jay Levine came down, was working here for a while for AAA, and Sherry Bollert. Everybody knows Sherry.
Right.
Before Sherry became congressman, he was part of our weekly poker games, and Bernie, and that poker game is still going today. I wonder, not the same people, but I have I continue that poker tradition even till today. When we, matter of fact, last Friday I was there, lost a bundle, a losing day of poker.
Didn't Craig Hodling also follow you down to Washington, D.C.?
Craig came down, yeah, and Jerry Ashwell.
Jerry came down, too.
Yeah, Jerry Ashwell worked at the same station I was at when I was doing folk music, WABA, and he tried to get me fired, so that was a nice thing to do when he came down. I try to think of it as not really personal, because at the time he was considered one of the higher-ups at the station and in on the meetings, and they were trying to cut costs. And I was, at the time, director of FM operations. FM operations in the early 60s was that you were the only one, and somebody had to take care of FM because nobody else was paying attention to it. So you handle it. Folk music started for me on FM radio mostly. It was on AM and FM, but it was an AM daytimer, which means it went off at sundown. But we continued with FM. And because it was so popular at the time, we sold a lot of FM receivers. So we had excuse me for just a moment here. haven't talked this long in a long time. We sold a lot of FM sets and got a nice, huge audience. But in those days, FM was elevator music. You know, nobody listened to FM. Opera and all that highfalutin stuff, but no real radio was on FM at the time. So anyway, I don't know. I lost my train of thought here, so you'll have to give me back.
Well, okay, now getting back to your president of the World Folk Music Association, you're on a first name basis with all of these famous folk music stars.
Well, I know quite a few of them. Yes, of course. After all these years, but there are still some I haven't met. But I did interviews with most of them. When I got started, people like Judy Collins, Baez, Peter, Paul and Mary, Bob Dylan. These people were all just starting, so we were all in it together. And you know, whenever they found somebody in a city that had a folk show, you know, we got immediate response. And John Denver was probably the one that I got to know the best, and through folk music when he became a member of the Mitchell Trio. And came to town. He was the only one of the group that played guitar and wrote music. So when they weren't playing, he would come back to town. We had a live show, a hootenanny show in those days, and he would call up and wanted to know if he could stop by and sing a song or two that he'd just written and try it out. And he would come down, and we would do that. And he co-wrote Country Roads with a couple of our local people here, and did very well with that. Mm-hmm. And whenever he was in town, you know, he'd give me a call. I had the whole group over for a cookout, and shortly after he got married, he brought Annie to town, and so when we had the cookout and celebrated his marriage. So yeah, I got to know quite a few people, but John I remember the most because even when he became King of the Mountain, you know, he kind of kept the door open. You know, if he would see me somewhere, if we weren't running each other, at least he remembered my name. When a lot of others you open the door to, and when they reach the top, they can't remember exactly who you were, but they knew you were there somewhere. John always knew, and whenever we bumped into each other, we did a show down in Charlotte, a reunion show that he was, well, his group, we brought out a retirement, and they shot a TV show down in North Carolina, Charlotte, and I was in the hotel lobby for some reason, and the elevator door opens, and out walks John with his guitar, and the first thing he said, "Hey, Dick, how you going?" You know, and told me he didn't have much time. He was only there for a day, and he had to fly back to Washington or the following night. And I said, "Yeah, that's right." I said, "I got to leave too." And he said, "Well, you want to ride?" So I got to fly back to Washington with John Denver he was the pilot on a jet plane. We left on a jet plane. So that's one of the relationships I had that I treasured to this day.
Well, Dick, we only got a minute to go here. I want to thank you. I told you that time just flies by with this program. I just can't get over it.
We'll call it part.
I want to thank you very, very much. So we've only got 60 seconds to go. Lou, you got any further questions for Mr. Cerri? Or?
No. Well, the only other question that I have would be, Mr. Cerri, do you have any websites that you'd like our listeners to visit?
Well, yes. The World Folk Music Association website is WFMA.net. That will give you a lot of information about the World Folk Music Association and a lot of the stuff we have available for sale, a lot of CDs and DVDs and books and things. And you also have an opportunity to become a member, and that gives you a lot of benefits.
I think I will. I think I'll join.
Good for you. WFMA.net.
Thank you. Okay, that about does it. Only 8 seconds to go here. Dick, thank you very much. Do have a nice weekend. Thank you for your appearance on the show. Really appreciate it.
It's been fun.
Okay. Bye.
All right. Thanks. Bye.